Welcome to this week's video blog. A few weeks ago, I mentioned in this blog post that I attended the Leadership Conference at RRU University. One of the speakers, the keynote speaker, was Adam Kahane, and he said something that struck me. Now, one of the things I always try and do whenever I go to a conference or a seminar, workshop, I try and walk away with at least one idea or one piece of information or one thought that I can use going forward. And at the two-day conference that I attended, there were many of those moments. But there was one that particularly stood out at me, and it was Adam's keynote address to the conference. And he was talking about collaboration. And his latest book, which is Collaborating with the Enemy, How to Work with People You Don't Agree With or Like or Trust. Now, Adam's got a vast body of knowledge. He was originally a climate economist. He spent time in South Africa. In fact, he was living in South Africa for a while when they were moving from apartheid to a democracy, and they had the reconciliation process going. He was involved quite heavily in that. He was also quite heavily involved in some early negotiations with the government of Colombia and FARC rebels, which 20-odd years down the road from his meetings led to some of the negotiations and settlements that happened in the country of Colombia. But the piece that struck out at me was the word collaborate and collaboration. And if you think, if you look at the dictionary, there's two definitions for that. One is to work jointly with, and the second is to cooperate traitorously with the enemy. Two really opposing ideas. We think that when we think of collaborate, most of us will go to the idea of teamwork, working together to find a common goal, to work towards targets, and then we'll need to work together. It's this kumbaya, let's get together and pull together and work this out. But the piece that stopped me and got me thinking was the other definition of collaborate, to cooperate traitorously with the enemy. And if you, to picture that, think of some of the images that came out of France, actually Europe after the Second World War, where collaborators were publicly humiliated. There are a number of pictures of women who had collaborated with the Germans, French women who collaborated with German officers who had their heads shaved and were marched through their towns and jeered at because they were termed collaborators. So how does that work? How can we have one without the other? And that really got me thinking about it because, you know, on one hand, the one definition, it talks about how we need to work together, and the other one has this whole idea of death to collaborators. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I think of times that I've been coaching individuals where they're in teams or they're having to work with people, and they say, well, I can't work with that person. We have trust issues, or the other person doesn't listen to me. And for me, it comes back to this whole idea again of control and not control. You know, there are things we can control and there are things we can't control. I spoke about that in my last week's video because I was outside in the garden with the weather. And when we're faced with situations, in this case, let's say with teams, and there are individuals in that teams that we don't like, we don't get along with, how can we get beyond that? So again, I look at it, okay, in those situations, what is it you can control? And what can't you control? Well, you can control your attitudes, right? You can control how you think about things. You can control how you react to things. So by looking at the big picture of whatever that goal is or whatever that target is that you're aiming for, what can you do in your sphere of control to help move that along? How can you step over those things that you can't control? Just think about that. I'll leave you with that thought. And so till next week, feel free to add any comments or suggestions. on the bottom of this video. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you have. Thank you and have a great day.